Good evening, and welcome to a special edition of PBS, where we will be discussing one of the most favored biblical women who ever existed, Mary. With me tonight, we have Delaney Osterday, who has studied favored and fallen biblical women at Georgetown University and is well versed in this subject. Delaney, welcome.
Thank you for having me tonight. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Oh, the pleasure is mine. Let's get right into things, shall we?
Sounds good, Mallory. I would like to start by giving a brief overview of Mary and how she is described in the Bible, and then move forward to talk about pieces of art that recreate the image of this favored woman in history and their portrayal through different media types.
Great. Well, to begin, translations of text are so significant to this topic, especially when dealing with Scripture. In order to understand Mary better in Scripture, we need to understand the translations behind our text today. In the Bible, Mary is portrayed as a very feminine and motherly figure. For example, when the angel Gabriel came to her and said that she would bear the Son of God who would one day save the world, or the time Jesus goes to the temple without her and she is worried because she cannot find her son, or even the time she and Mary Magdalene take Jesus' body off the cross to clean him up for the proper burial. These are examples within the Scriptures that just show how motherly Mary's character is.
Thanks, Mallory. That's a great way to start this discussion about Mary. The depiction of her as a caring mother is essential in understanding Mary as the favored woman she is portrayed as in all text, and that is the one thing that has persisted throughout history. An example of this would be in Luke 1:28, where we see her described as highly favored by God. In order to understand the significance of what this statement meant when the scripture was written, we need to look further into translation. This phrase, highly favored, comes from the Greek translation meaning much grace. Mary was an ordinary woman who was graced by God. That is why in many of the images that we see, Mary is often surrounded by light as she is told that she is highly favored by God and will conceive a son that will eventually save the world.
That's very interesting, Delaney. Since Mary is so prominent as a highly favored biblical figure in early Scripture, why does it seem as though she just disappears after Acts chapter 1? There is not a lot about her life after Jesus' ascension, nor much about her assumption into heaven. Is that why you often do not see many images of her in this regard? Why do you think that is?
Yes, this is an interesting topic. I believe that this part of Mary's life isn't talked about much because we don't know a lot about her after Jesus' ascension into heaven. Mary remained on the earth until she completed the course of her human life, and although she was assumed into heaven through Jesus, Mary was fully human, and I think that is why she is so relatable. I also feel that the reason she isn't talked about much after Jesus' ascension into heaven is because her job at that point was done. She didn't need praise or adoration after Jesus was gone, she just wanted the will of her son to be carried out in God's name.
Why would you say that stained glass and even sculptures of Mary are so powerful to viewers?
For the more physical works of art, such as stained glass, we tend to have very intense and more emotional responses to color and three-dimensional design. Since she is a human figure, it allows the viewer to see Mary in a more humanized and real way. Also, three-dimensional design allows the viewer to engage all of their senses, such as touch and sight, into the piece, and they get a more real understanding of what this imaginable figure in history would look like.
Another interesting thing I've noticed while viewing some of these pieces displayed is the focal point and how that can vary within multiple pieces of artwork. In your opinion, what significance does the focal point hold, and how is that altered when there are other figures present in the work of art, such as Jesus?
I'm glad you mentioned that, Mallory. The focal point says a great deal about the message the artist is trying to convey. When Mary is present in a work of art, it is sometimes alone, with Jesus, with angels, or other figures from biblical text as well. Depending on the artist, sometimes Mary is the focal point of the painting, and other times it is more about the situation taking place around Mary in order to tell a story. There is a substantial amount of information we could talk about relating to why the image looks like it does, such as the time period, the artist's gender, and the geographic area of the artist. All of these factors correspond to how Mary is portrayed in a painting, but for now, let's just look at the paintings themselves and how they depict Mary. Since Mary is deemed to be the most important biblical figure after Jesus, she is often the focal point of so many pieces. There are more paintings, songs, poems, and texts that were made for her than any other biblical figure, which is a true testament to her significance. While the portrayal of Mary has drastically changed over time, what hasn't changed is the desire of people to know as much about Mary as they possibly can.
Exactly. Excellent point. Why don't we take a look at some of these images in order to understand Mary's role in paintings throughout history? Well, that's about all we have time for on today's special. We'll be back next month with expert Taylor Henry to discuss Ruth and her portrayal in different forms of art as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Mallory.